I'm sure you saw the title of the video and were like, Mega Man Legends spin-offs? Plural? And yeah, despite there being only 2 numbered entries in the Mega Man Legends series, there have been a bunch of side games and ports that were all worthy of discussion in their own dedicated video. Obviously, the most significant one is the Misadventures of Tron Bonne that came out on PlayStation 1, but I'm saving that for the end of the video as it will take up most of the runtime. Instead, I wanted to start with the different ports of Mega Man Legends. Last week, I covered Mega Man Legends on PS1 in its entirety, and while I could have made it a segment to talk about ports then, like I said, I wanted to save it for today. Legends 1 first came out in 1997, but got a port for the Nintendo 64 in 2000 called Mega Man 64, following the common name scheme of many games on that console. I was really curious about trying this version of the game because, as I said in the previous video, the game was pretty well designed around the original PlayStation controller. But the N64 had a much different controller that made 3D action far easier to control than on PlayStation 1. So I checked the manual to see what it had to say before booting it up. It does give us an idea on the various ways to hold the N64 controller in this game and what the buttons do. This had me a bit worried as A and B were jump and shoot like you'd expect, but then the C down button was the interact button, which was circle in the original game. But you get used to it much faster than I thought, which goes for all the controls. You can use the stick or the D-pad for movement, and I feel like this is one of the only N64 games I've played where the D-pad is used for much of anything at all. L and R can still be used for strafing, and then when holding them together you lock on. This was more awkward than PS1, but still it was certainly usable. The C button on the side is how you use special weapons, which I definitely thought I'd have a problem with, but then I remembered a crucial fact. The special weapons are barely useful in this game anyway, so I was fine with that. So on the gameplay front, Mega Man 64 is a pretty decent replication of Mega Man Legends. No complaints there. It was the technical elements where things got a little more dicey. The PlayStation version of the game is the best by default because many compromises had to be made to fit the entire thing on N64. And that's not me throwing shade on it. To bring a PS1 game full of voice acting to N64 would require a lot of work. See the N64 port of Resident Evil 2 as an example, which I covered a few years ago. The N64 cartridge just couldn't fit as much audio onto it as a PS1 disc, so all the audio files had to be very compressed in quality to fit onto the cartridge. But despite how much respect I have for the difficult task the designers had, the end product is still this.
I'm sorry, Mega Man. I had some engine problems, and...
It's okay, Ro. But I'm glad you showed up when you did.
When the alternative is this.
I'm sorry, Mega Man. I had some engine problems, and...
It's okay, Ro. But I'm glad you showed up when you did.
The N64 also had a softer video output than PS1, so the image is much less sharp. Some textures like the flutter don't look correct, like the damaged flutter sprites are not arranged correctly here, and then in gameplay, the draw distance was far lower on the N64 than PS1, with a fog effect to mask the game not having as much loaded in at any given moment compared to the PS1 game. And then, during action sequences, the game was prone to slow down because it couldn't handle the intensity. All things that don't ruin the game per se, but they just make it very easy to pick which one of the 2 games is the better way to play this one. Mega Man 64 reviewed much worse than the PS1 version as well, but looking at it, I don't think it's because the game was far worse to play in 2000 than it was in 1997, but it wasn't going to impress any critics by the time it was released. Like I said, Legends 1 control and gameplay felt super cool and inspired if you consider the fact that it released before Ocarina of Time on N64. But then, this is just Legends re-released without much alteration to how it felt to play after that super influential game came out. While its sequel was around the corner that pulled off even more creative gameplay ideas than Ocarina and was one of the best games on the console. Mega Man 64 is going to feel like a dated re-release meant to shove something onto the N64 more than an attempt to do anything new with the game. But it does have one bit of enduring legacy. Recently, a recompilation of the game was released on PC in its beta stage. The prospect of a Mega Man Legends PC port is pretty cool, especially because the game's original PC release is old and outdated now, but the problem is, it is the N64 version, which means worse audio and textures, but it does have native widescreen and 60fps gameplay, so that certainly boosts the N64 version up. But at this stage, I'd rather just play the PS1 game. But speaking of native widescreen, an interesting re-release of the game was the one on the PlayStation Portable. In Japan only, the Mega Man Legends games, or the Rockman Dash games as they're known there, were given native PSP releases, not just emulations of the PS1 versions, so I got my hands on them and gave them a try. Unfortunately, there's no option to play them in English, but what I was most curious about was how the game was going to translate. The PSP had a 16:9 screen, so I was curious if they were going to crop the game or give it a widescreen display, and they went with the harder thing. The HUD is stretched, and if that bothers you, you can play it in 4x3 if you'd like, but the rest of the action is real widescreen. The controls of Legends work pretty well on PSP too. Since the original game didn't have an analog stick to work with, the PSP only having one stick doesn't present an issue for the game at all. It plays just like it did on PS1. Only thing is, without the R2 button, you'll need to use L and R to lock on, like in Mega Man 64. Honestly, if this was in English or came with subtitles, I'd consider it the best version of the game we have to date. But since it doesn't have either of those things, you'd only be able to follow along and enjoy the world and story and know what to do if you understood Japanese. Mega Man Legends 2 and the PSP is sort of the same deal, but it came out worse than the first game. Not to say the porting job was worse than Legends 1, but it's strictly because Mega Man Legends 2 made very good use of the PS1's dual analog stick controller. So if you put that game on a PSP, which only has one stick, it's going to feel pretty awkward to control the camera and move around and shoot. Otherwise, it has the same benefits and drawbacks as the PSP version of Legends 1. But there are a bunch of weird Mega Man Legends themed games out there, all Japanese exclusive for mobile phones. Thanks to the Mega Man Wiki for having a list. Let's take a look. Okay, first we've got Mega Man Legends 5 Islands, which was a flip phone game that actually tried to be a full attempt at a Mega Man Legends game with 3D combat action and dungeon crawling. A YouTuber called Shadow Rock ZX made a video about this game and how, thanks to the community, you can now fully play it and it's in English. Don't expect to be playing the hidden Mega Man Legends 3 or something, but it's a pretty remarkable effort for an old phone game. The link to his video will be in the description. Next up is Mega Man Legends Great Adventure to Save the World. This is a Taiwanese PC exclusive educational game? Oh no! And what else we got here? Mega Man Legends Golf, where you can play as Mega Man, Tron, or a Servbot playing golf, on a mobile phone game from 2003. I think we can all agree these screenshots make the game look pretty awesome, am I right? Next up is the Servbot Files, where you control a Servbot that flies around and you steer him away from obstacles. Sounds like an ancient version of Flappy Bird or something, I don't know. Next up, Servbot Assembly is where you do exactly what the name suggests. But we're talking about a mobile phone game from the early 2000s, so don't expect much. Thankfully, somebody backed up the website with the Wayback Machine, so we can see some screenshots. Evidently, it comes with an easy, normal, and hard difficulty option for those brave enough to assemble some Servbots. And then you have Servbot Punishment, where Tron gets mad at one of them and tries to punish it, but you need to play as it to survive the traps. Which actually sounds like a pretty good premise for a small phone game. And it's like an inverse of that minigame in the Misadventures of Tron Bonne, where you have to torture the Servbot. Here you're playing as the Servbot trying to live. But I've never played it, so yeah. And lastly, you have Rolls 15, which is a slide puzzle of a picture of Roll. Not much to say about that, just hope it didn't cost any money to play. Now I'm sure you're ready for us to get into the real subject of this video. Before I do, what's worth noting is that all copies of the Misadventures of Tron Bonne came with a demo disc for Mega Man Legends 2. Demo discs were pretty common back in the PS1 days. I had one that gave me brief access to a ton of random games on PS2 when I got bored of my other full games. In English, the Legends 2 demo was nothing to write home about, but in Japan, the demo was actually a prequel to Legends 2 with content not seen in the final game. I was going to track down a copy to play and cover for this video, but I saw a smaller channel called The Game Stand did a full 10-minute video on every mode and the story content it held. The demo giving you a preview of every type of game mode from combat to overworld to dungeons, so you'd know what the game was going to be like without knowing the story. You have to buy the game for that. But yeah, if you want more info, check out his video in the description. Anyway, we may now get to the main event. Somebody decided that Bonds were simply so iconic in Legends 1 they needed a spin-off game, and thus The Misadventures of Tron Bonne was born and released on PlayStation 1 in 1999 in Japan and 2000 in English-speaking countries. I can also say that as far as canon main timeline Mega Man games, which would be all of the classic X, Zero, ZX, and Legends games, I think this is the only one I've never played before today. There's a few reasons for this. One, back in 2015 when I first got obsessed with Mega Man, there was no way for me to play it easily. I got most of them on the PS3 and Wii U virtual stores, and then I could emulate older 2D titles on the house computer. Past that, I had to buy copies of the games like the Zero Collection on DS or the DS copies of the ZX games. In early 2015, none of the Legends games were accessible like this until Legends 1 came to PS3 in the fall of that year. I can talk about it next time, but I then needed to buy a physical PS1 disc of Legends 2, which was super difficult since it was out of my price range as a 14-year-old. But then Tron Bonne was far beyond that because it's honestly one of the most expensive Mega Man games ever made. In the US, it probably sold like 15 and a half copies or something, so I couldn't get it. Once I had hardware that could emulate games like this, I just never made time for it because I never really was that interested in it from the outside. I enjoyed the Bonds in Legends 1, but not enough to where I needed a spin-off about them, so I had no idea what I was really in for here. So that's what I was going to discover today. As I said, I'm just not really sure how it got greenlit in the first place. Not as a cheap insult, I'm just genuinely surprised. Like, Mega Man Legends was only one risky game in the series, and they were like, yeah, Tron and the Bonne family definitely should get a spin-off. When any other Mega Man series that got a spin-off didn't get them until they were a little more established. But yeah, the Misadventures of Tron Bonne dropped on PS1 between the releases of Legends 1 and 2. The game is a prequel to Legends 1, which doesn't really mean all that much for the lore, it just means the Bonnes haven't met Mega Man in the Caskets yet. Although, I say it out loud and I realize that Mega Man in the Caskets kinda sounds like a rock band. This is showing us what the Bonnes' various misadventures tended to look like before then. The setup is that on a mission for a huge refractor, Teasel is cornered by Glide and his gang of bird bots. They work for Mr. Loath, who Teasel owes a million zenny to. Teasel and Bonne Bonne are captured, and Tron discovers the money Teasel owes, and so her task for the game is doing various missions to raise the million zenny required to free Teasel and Bonne. Again, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this game because I never played it before, and it never really captured my attention much to be super curious about. I vaguely knew it was a game with minigames in it and R&D elements, but after playing it, my conclusion is that the game really lives and dies by how charming you think it is. As in, do you care much for the Bonne family and the serve bots enough for it to carry a game? Luckily, I found them entertaining in Legends 1 to the point where I might even say they're probably my favorite rival characters in any Mega Man game. And so I really enjoyed them here. Teasel trying to worm his way out of paying up is funny and in character, and then seeing Tron's interaction with the serve bots is really enjoyable. Like how there's a whole torture room on their home base if any serve bot starts acting lazy. The serve bots are incompetent in a funny way, like Mission 1 where they try to rob a bank but for some reason drop you in front of an animal hospital by accident. But they're just so adorable that I laugh and go along with it. I think it's just the perfect combination of their voices being really cute and the designs being super iconic, and this game finding the right balance between the funny incompetence and getting the job done. Like, they'll capture the animals on the farm as instructed, but just look goofy as hell trying to do it. Also helps the Bonne family's image in general to have this game, showing they do tend to succeed in their goals when Mega Man isn't around beating them up. But yeah, the conclusion is this game made me enjoy the Bonnes and the serve bots more than I already did. But then comes the gameplay. I said the game lived and died by how much you like these characters because the gameplay isn't bad in its own, just nothing super remarkable, I thought. I don't know, to me this was the definition of a one and done game. It's neat, but nothing I'd ever want to play again. As I said, the game very heavily revolves around minigames, not really core gameplay. But if I were to compare it to anything, this might sound insane, but hear me out. This game kinda reminds me of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker for the PSP, in that you have a home base with various departments. As Tron, you can interact with the various serve bots. Serve bots all have different stats and strengths and weaknesses that you can develop and upgrade as the game goes on, and you can select specific serve bots to go on scouting missions to bring back resources to the Gesellschaft. This reminds me of the base development and mission deployment elements of Peace Walker and MGS5. Especially as you bring resources back to your main base to develop upgrades for the Gustav, which is the main battle tank you control in the action levels. And oh, what a perfect segue. This game has 3 mission types that make up core gameplay. Let's start with the 6 action stages. In them, you control the Gustav, and these are the basic Mega Man Legends levels. The controls will feel familiar to anyone who's played either Legends game, because Tron Bonne's action gameplay kind of feels like an in-between point of those two games. It still features the same control options as the first Legends game where you can turn with the D-pad and strafe with the shoulder buttons or vice versa. But then, when you lock on with the L2 button, you get a reticle like Legends 2. You still can't move while locked on though, unfortunately. While these were the most like Mega Man Legends gameplay, the action missions were still not really worth writing home about. It can be fun, like in the city, as your goal is to destroy stuff and send serve bots into buildings to ransack them to find money while the police try to stop you. But I just didn't find the stages super special, like they were alright. The police are led by Denise, who's endearingly incompetent but tries her best to stop you for fear of getting fired. But then she's also so competent that she can take the Gustav on foot and toss it around in comedic fashion. But yeah, the levels were just running around and collecting money and shooting targets with Mega Man Legends control. I thought it was fine, just nothing special. So then you check out the other 2 mission types. Puzzle stages were also alright, just not that fun to play. In these, you need to control the Gustav tank on a grid and steal boxes from a dock. But you can only lift a certain number of times, so you need to strategically figure out how you're supposed to bring all the boxes back to the ship. Sometimes you'll have to get creative when moving certain boxes to make pathways through the water and get bonus points if you collect the extra box in addition to the main 4 you need to get. I thought these were neat and the music was catchy for them, but then I'm also just not that interested in puzzle games, generally speaking, so these stages were a little more for me than a quick novelty, not something I really enjoyed. But then, The dig stages were the worst ones by far. You navigate a cave full of traps with your serve bots, and I just thought it was really boring. It felt like it went on for an eternity, and sometimes I could barely tell what was even going on. Like I drilled through a wall in the second one and suddenly found myself under attack with no health left. And then getting a game over means I lost. But you're just flying forward, listening to dialogue, and occasionally figuring out how to get through a trap and shut it off. It's the most boring style of gameplay in the whole game, and that sucks because you need to explore these caves to find the right gear to upgrade the goose staff and action stages. But the good news is, you don't need to clear every mission to get the million zenny though. At first, I just did every puzzle and city level available and did one dig and then had a million zenny. But then Mr. Loth won't give Teasel and Bonne back because the 1 million zenny isn't enough to cover the 2 million in interest, so you then need to get 2 million zenny by doing more missions. These missions are worth more money, so it won't take that much longer to finish the game, but yeah, the action stages are now stealing animals from a farm, which was okay. Again, it was Mega Man Legends gameplay, but on a farm fighting infinitely respawning enemies. And the puzzle stages got more complex, as there was an element where a serve bot could man a forklift, and another where he can control a crane, and there were conveyor belts and such, but nothing about this would be too difficult to handle if you had a grip on the previous levels. Though I hated the forklift ones the most because the cutscene of the robot moving the machine in place takes really long to play out, and you have to watch it multiple times. Once you have the 2 million zenny, you can proceed to the endgame where Loth shows himself off as the most realistic Mega Man villain, as he says you now owe him interest on the interest and tosses you in jail alongside Teasel and Bonne. Where Teasel has his back to the door writing a letter to Tron thinking he's hearing voices in his head when Tron is shouting at him from 2 feet away. That was funny. But then, the Servbots rescue the family in the final action dungeon, which isn't much to write home about, but probably is the level most akin to the Legends games, as you end the sequence on a battle with Glide and a machine. The Servbots even destroy the Colossus mech that Glide and Loth found. That's the final boss, and it's pretty easy. You just need to remove all these power nodes before shooting the boss directly while avoiding the extra enemies that attack you. But in the end, we see the Bonnes may be rogues, but aren't bad people. Tron felt bad for Denise in the city levels, so she decides to rescue Glide and Loth from the ocean, only to drop them off at Police HQ, which gives Denise a huge boost in job security while the Bonnes take off to their next adventure, ending the game. Though, I must say, there is one hilariously egregious contrivance in the ending. They fight Glide and the cave is about to collapse and the screen fades out while they're running away, and the very next scene, no joke, has the characters comment on how they have no idea how they got out of it, like straight out of this Simpsons scene.
I won't bore you with the details of our miraculous escape, but we desperately need
To destroy the Colossus. Honestly, I don't know what to say about this game in conclusion. Like, it sounds kind of mean for me to say if you're the type of person who would like this kind of game, then this is the kind of game you would like, because I don't mean that as an insult on the game inherently. It's just a fine game that isn't really for me. I enjoy Legends gameplay, but I just didn't find the way Tron Bonne uses the main gameplay to be entertaining past a novelty, I guess. The puzzles were alright, but as I said, I'm not really super into that kind of game. Except Tetris, which may in fact be one of the greatest games to ever be made, but that's neither here nor there. The digging levels were just really boring and not something I enjoyed. I found the story, art, and characters of Tron Bonne charming, but again, something I'd only play once in my life and never again. It's just not my kind of game. I tend to prefer action games. It doesn't mean Tron Bonne is bad at what it does, just not a system I'm interested in. But honestly, that's all I really wanted to say about this game. I know it wasn't a deep dive, that's why I connected this game to the video on ports and other things I didn't have a lot to say about, to make sure the video still had a decent runtime. I'm just not someone who has a lot to say about, nor could I produce a lot to say about games that don't really appeal to me like this one, so I'm not going to force it nor say the game is bad because it's not my thing, because that's not true. But yeah, that's about it for today. Next up, to close this mini Mega Man Legends marathon, we've got Mega Man Legends 2, a game I'm very excited to replay because I really loved it when I last played it, but that was a decade ago, so I'm curious if it's still the improved sequel I remember it being, but only time will tell on that. So until that day comes, I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.